Why was she trembling, not from fear, but from something deeper? Anticipation, maybe. Or that strange calm that comes when a person realizes there's no way back. Lieutenant Sarah Reeves crouched in the shadows of a half-collapsed building on the outskirts of Sana'a, Yemen. The desert night pressed down like a furnace, the air thick with dust and memory. Her gloved fingers traced the cracked concrete, the texture grounding her. In her earpiece, the faint hum of encrypted comms was the only sound that reminded her she wasn't entirely alone. Phantom 1, this is Overlord. Target building is showing 4 heat signatures. Second floor, east corner. Hostage appears to be in central room. You are cleared to proceed. Her jaw tightened. She tapped her throat mic twice, acknowledgement without words. The 4-person unit she led was already in motion, moving like ghosts through the darkened alleys that framed the compound. A suspected Al-Qaeda safe house. An American aid worker held for 72 hours. A window closing by the minute. 3 years with Naval Special Warfare Development Group, SEAL Team 6, had prepared her for moments like this. Yet nothing dulled the taste of that pre-mission adrenaline, the sharp metallic tang that lived somewhere between fear and focus. Moving to position Alpha, she whispered. Her breath fogged inside the night vision lenses. The rifle against her shoulder, her customized HK-416, felt like an extension of her heartbeat. Every sense stretched thin, tuned for danger. She hadn't set out to make history, one of the first women to complete Bud S and qualify for the SEALs after the 2016 combat role integration. She hadn't wanted headlines or speeches. She'd wanted silence, to serve, to follow the path her father once walked before the ocean claimed him off the Carolina coast. Now she carried his memory as she carried her weapon, steady, silent, essential. Phantom 1, be advised, came Colonel Merrill Tangisdal's voice, brittle through static. We have new intelligence. Target building may contain a high-value individual not in the original briefing. Proceed with extreme caution. Her pulse quickened. High value meant more eyes, more guns, more reasons to die. She gestured low to Chief Petty Officer Jackson, her second in command, 20 meters right. He nodded once, the kind of acknowledgement that passed between people who'd trained together long enough to read breath as language. The original infiltration plan had already unraveled earlier that night, a civilian convoy appearing out of nowhere, forcing a route change through the old quarter. Now, this update added weight to an already fragile equation. Sarah glanced at her watch. 0200. 90 minutes before a patrol rotation would flood the district with guards. 90 minutes to extract the hostage and vanish. She took a breath and scaled the perimeter wall. The bricks were warm even at night, radiating heat like the memory of the day. She dropped soundlessly inside the courtyard. This isn't just about the hostage, Colonel Tangisdal had told her before deployment. There's chatter about a coordinated attack, something major. You bring that intel home, Lieutenant. The stakes couldn't be higher. Sarah hadn't asked for details. In her world, questions had a weight of their own, sometimes heavier than bullets. She scanned the compound. A stray cat darted across the yard. A lantern flickered in a window. Somewhere in the distance, a child cried, a reminder that war was never as far from innocence as people liked to believe. Phantom Team, she breathed. Execute on my mark of 3, 2, 1. The breach charge thudded against the side door. A flash, silence, then chaos. Gunfire shredded the night. Not 4 hostiles, 11. They'd been waiting. We're blown, Jackson's voice cracked through comms. Sarah dropped behind a pillar as concrete splintered under incoming fire. Through her goggles she saw movement, the hostage, bound, dragged toward the rear exit by 2 men. She didn't think she moved. Breaking from cover, she neutralized the closest threat with 2 clean shots, each one surgical, deliberate. Her mind split, one half processing angles, cover, reloads, the other whispering her father's voice. Never freeze, Sarah. Fear slows the trigger. Hostage moving south exit. I'm in pursuit, she said, low, steady. The team's sniper, Rodriguez, covered her advance from the rooftop, his muzzle flashes lighting the alley. She sprinted through narrow corridors, a deadly maze of dust and echoes. Then a blur. From a dark doorway a man lunged, too close, her rifle caught on the wall. A gloved elbow arced through the shadows and smashed into her face. White light exploded behind her eyes. The impact tore her night vision goggles off. Something split open, cheek to bone. Warm blood spilled into her mouth. The world narrowed to sound and instinct. She dropped her rifle, let it hang, drew her sidearm. 2 point-blank shots. The body fell before the echo did. Phantom 1 is hit, she rasped, tasting metal. Still operational. Pain pulsed with every breath, but she pressed forward. Somewhere ahead, the hostage was still moving, still alive. Outside, the exfil helicopter called in an emergency report. Surface-to-air missile systems activating nearby. Unlisted equipment. No intel on it. Someone knew they were coming. Someone had fed their location. Abort mission. Repeat, abort. Colonel Tangisdal's voice cracked through static. Phantom team, you have 3 minutes to reach secondary extraction point. 3 minutes. Sarah hesitated. The hostage was in sight, pulled into a waiting vehicle. Her training screamed obedience. Her heart screamed not yet. I can still reach the target, she insisted, pressing forward, blood dripping down her collar. Negative, Phantom 1. That's a direct order. We are compromised at multiple levels. Multiple levels. Something shifted in her gut, a sense of wrongness deeper than mission failure. They withdrew under fire. Jackson covered left. Rodriguez dragged Martinez, who was bleeding badly. Then the street lit up. A hidden IED detonated. Martinez went down hard. Sarah's ears rang, a high whine that erased everything else. She forced her vision to focus: dust, flame, bodies. Jackson was shouting something she couldn't hear. We're not going to make it, he yelled finally, pressing against a doorway for cover. Sarah blinked, blood from her eyes. They were being herded, cut off from both extraction points. The enemy was everywhere. She keyed her comms. Overlord, we need immediate assistance. Martinez is critical. Request emergency extraction. Silence then. Phantom 1, be advised. Your biometric data has been flagged in system. Repeat, your identity has been compromised. Her breath caught. Say again. Unauthorized queries into your personnel file. Multiple access points. Someone's looking for you, Lieutenant. Her stomach went cold. The biometric alert meant her vitals, uploaded automatically when injured, had triggered a clearance review. But that system was sealed behind top-level command access. Who has clearance for that file? She demanded. Unknown. Operations room just lit up with red flag access attempts. Someone's very interested in who you are. The words cut deeper than the wound on her face. Only a handful of people even knew what her file contained: the classified record of Operation Kingfisher, a mission that had gone so wrong it was buried under layers of denial and sealed orders, a mission that had already taken 11 good operators. She met Jackson's eyes. We have a mole. As if on cue, sniper fire tore into the wall beside them. The street sang with ricochets. Overlord, she said quietly, this is Phantom 1, initiating protocol Blackfish. Static, then Colonel Tangisdal's voice, low, resigned. Understood, Phantom 1, Godspeed. Protocol Blackfish. The phrase landed heavy. It meant disappearing, severing all comms, all support. No acknowledgement from command, no rescue, no existence. Sarah turned to her team, what was left of it. Martinez barely conscious, Jackson low on ammo, Rodriguez limping from shrapnel. We're not dying here, she said. Her voice was calm now, almost gentle. And we're not leaving without that hostage. They barricaded themselves in an abandoned shop. Sarah patched Martinez using the field methods from Lieutenant Susan O'Cuddy's manual: pressure, tape, morphine. Then she did something that felt almost ritual. She cut away her name tape and unit patch with her father's old Kabar knife. No name, no unit, no nation, only survival. Outside, the city breathed. Gunfire faded to sporadic bursts. The smell of burning diesel and cordite hung heavy in the air. For a long moment, Sarah sat against the wall, the knife resting on her knee. The adrenaline began to ebb and pain seeped in where focus had lived. She touched her cheek, the torn flesh sticky under her glove. The woman staring back from her reflection in a broken shard of glass didn't look like a seal anymore. She looked like a ghost, half erased, half reborn. Somewhere out there, someone in a clean uniform, sitting behind a desk, had decided she was expendable. And they'd opened her file, the one that wasn't supposed to exist. But Sarah Reeves wasn't the kind of woman who stayed erased for long. She looked at her team. "We move before dawn," she said softly. Jackson frowned. "To where?" "Where they least expect us." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Because sometimes leadership isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet certainty that even in betrayal, you keep moving forward. And as the night bled slowly toward morning, Lieutenant Sarah Reeves prepared to vanish, not in defeat, but in defiance. Because they might have her file. But they didn't have her. How long could silence stretch before it broke a person? The night had begun to thin, paling at the edges. Faint lines of dawn crawled across the rooftops of Sana'a, brushing the city's scars in shades of ash and amber. Inside the abandoned shop, Lieutenant Sarah Reeves sat motionless, watching the breath rise from Martinez's cracked lips. His pulse was weak but steady. She had cleaned the wound with what little sterile water they had left, but infection was a matter of time now. The blast had torn through his leg and the painkillers were running low. Still, he'd survived the night. That was something. "Time to move," she whispered. Chief Jackson was already awake, crouched near the broken window, eyes scanning the empty street. Rodriguez leaned against the wall, his left thigh bandaged and stiff. The exhaustion in their faces was a mirror of her own. 3 operators, cut off from command, hunted by an unseen enemy who knew their names, their movements, their blood type. But there was something deeper behind Sarah's eyes, a quiet calculation. She wasn't just thinking about escape anymore. She was thinking about why. Why had her file been accessed? Why now? And who inside the upper echelons had known about Operation Kingfisher, a mission so classified it didn't officially exist? She adjusted her headscarf, a piece of local cloth she'd torn from a market awning the night before. The fabric hid the deep gash along her cheek, now swollen and discolored. It also disguised her foreign features just enough to pass a glance. Jackson's voice broke the silence. "Ma'am, extraction's not coming, is it?" She met his eyes, and for a moment the commander mask slipped, just long enough for the truth to show. "No," she said softly, "we're on our own." They all knew what that meant. No satellite feed, no drone coverage, no backup. No one in the chain of command would acknowledge them. If they were captured, they'd die as ghosts. "Then what's the plan?" Rodriguez asked, voice graveled from dehydration. Sarah studied the faded city map spread across the floor, the lines traced in pencil, marked with smudges and memory. "We go underground," she said. "There's an old aqueduct system running beneath this district, Ottoman era. Locals still use parts of it for smuggling. We move through there to Sector 12. Jackson frowned, and then she met his gaze again, steady, unreadable. "Then we find whoever sold us out." The words landed like a stone dropped in water, quiet, but with ripples that reached every heart in the room. They moved out at first light. The streets were ghostly quiet, save for the sound of distant gunfire that never seemed to stop in the city. Stray dogs wandered the alleys, nosing through rubble. From a nearby mosque, The morning call to prayer drifted through the air, haunting and beautiful, like a song for the living and the dead alike. Sarah moved in front, her movements controlled, deliberate. Pain shot through her cheek with every step, but she kept her breathing even. She remembered her father teaching her that pain isn't the enemy, Sarah. Panic is. They reached the edge of the old quarter by mid-morning. Behind a collapsed well, a rusted metal grate led down into darkness. Rodriguez pried it open with a length of rebar. The smell hit them first, wet earth, mildew, ancient dust. "Welcome to the express lane," Jackson muttered, forcing a grim smile. Sarah climbed down first, her boots splashing into knee-deep water. The tunnels were narrow, lit only by the faint glow of her headlamp. The walls were carved with old Arabic script, worn smooth by centuries of time and runoff. Every sound echoed, every drip, every breath, every heartbeat. Hours passed like that, slow, suffocating, half in silence. Martinez groaned now and then, drifting in and out of consciousness. Rodriguez carried him on his shoulders despite his own limp. At one point, they rested in a wide junction where several tunnels met. Sarah switched off her light and let the dark swallow them. In that darkness, she thought about the voice on the comms, Tangisdal's controlled urgency, the phrase multiple unauthorized queries. Someone had broken into her file, and someone high enough had ordered their mission compromised. She leaned back against the damp wall, feeling the ache in her ribs. The memory of the Kingfisher mission surfaced like a nightmare she'd spent 2 years trying to bury, a failed extraction in coastal Somalia. 11 operators lost. Intel had been wrong. Air support had never arrived, and she'd been the only survivor. They'd blamed field confusion and chain of command delay. But Sarah had seen the satellite feed that day, seen the strike that came too late, too deliberate. And now it was happening again. She rubbed her temple. "They're tying up loose ends," she murmured. Jackson looked at her sharply. "What?" "Kingfisher," she said. "It's not dead like they said. Somebody's trying to erase it and me along with it." The silence that followed was heavy. Even Rodriguez stopped fidgeting. Finally Jackson spoke. "Then we don't run, we hunt." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "We hunt." They moved again after nightfall, following the aqueduct west until the tunnels opened into an abandoned water plant. There, under the cover of machinery and rusted pipes, they built a makeshift camp. Sarah used a scavenged laptop, part of a local engineer's tool bag, and connected through a secured frequency generator hidden in her wrist module. The encryption was crude, risky, but she had no other choice. The screen flickered to life. A single signal pinged back from the secure U.S. Navy grid, a trace she hadn't expected to reach anyone, but someone responded. A single line appeared. "Lieutenant Reeves, confirm identity." Her heart thudded. She typed quickly, "Phantom 1, Blackfish protocol active, request intel on personnel file access." The reply came slower this time. "Access originated from East Coast Command. User ID, WSD 4139. She froze. WSD, Admiral Jonathan Westfield. Her former commanding officer. Her mentor. The man who had signed the after-action report on Kingfisher. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. She could almost hear his voice from years ago, calm, measured, full of fatherly pride. "You've got the instincts, Sarah. Don't let anyone make you doubt them." Now those same instincts told her something ugly. He'd been behind everything. She shut the laptop. The sound echoed. Jackson watched her. "Who was it?" "Someone I used to trust," she said quietly. "Too much." The words tasted like ash. She stood up, packing in the dim light. Her face throbbed. The bandage was damp with blood again. Every movement hurt, but she couldn't stop moving. "What do we do now?" Rodriguez asked. Sarah turned, her expression carved in stone. "We find Westfield's man in country. He's here. probably monitoring our cleanup. Jackson nodded slowly. You think he's the one who fed our coordinates? I know it. They began planning in whispers, mapping possible locations for the mercenary cell that had handled the hostage. If they could intercept them, they could confirm Westfield's connection and maybe still recover the hostage. By dawn, they were moving again. The sun rose harsh and white over Sana'a, casting long shadows across the ruins. They traveled by back streets, avoiding patrols and checkpoints. The air buzzed with tension and heat. By midday, Sarah's body screamed for rest, but her mind stayed sharp, too sharp. Every noise was a trigger, every open window a threat. As they passed a shuttered cafe, an old woman sitting in the doorway caught her eye. The woman's face was lined like a map of grief. She offered Sarah a small piece of flatbread without speaking. Sarah hesitated, then accepted it. Their eyes met for just a moment, two women bound by different wars but the same quiet endurance. As they moved on, Sarah whispered under her breath, "No one should have to live like this." The words weren't meant for anyone else, but Jackson heard them. "Neither should you, ma'am," he said softly. She didn't answer. Some truths didn't need words. That night, under a fractured moon, they reached the outskirts of a small industrial compound, one of the locations marked on the stolen map. Sarah crouched behind a burned-out truck, scanning the perimeter through binoculars. Two guards at the gate, a generator building in the back, no obvious cameras. "This is it," she said, "Westfield's local asset." Jackson loaded his last magazine. "We're outnumbered." "We usually are." She gave a faint, dry smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. As the team moved into position, Sarah's pulse slowed, her thoughts narrowing to pure instinct. The ache in her face, the betrayal in her heart, they all blurred into one thing: purpose. When she moved, it was with that same quiet precision that had once earned her a place among the SEALs. No hesitation, no sound, no mercy. The hunt had begun. And for the first time since the mission started, Lieutenant Sarah Reeves wasn't running from the ghosts of her past. She was chasing them. How do you hunt a ghost when you've become one yourself? The compound loomed ahead under the fractured moonlight, a forgotten industrial sprawl at the edge of the desert. Wind hissed through twisted metal and scattered sand like whispers from the dead. Lieutenant Sarah Reeves crouched low behind a rusted truck chassis, her breathing slow, deliberate. Every nerve in her body hummed. The pain in her cheek had become a constant, throbbing companion, dull now, almost grounding. To her right, Chief Jackson checked his weapon, the last magazine already chambered. Rodriguez, limping but focused, positioned himself near a broken wall that once housed an oil pipe. Together, they formed the last remains of Phantom Team, a shadow of what had once been one of the Navy's most elite units. They were cut off, wounded, nearly out of ammunition. But they weren't done. Sarah raised her binoculars one last time. Two guards at the main gate, one on the roof with an outdated rifle, and a generator building humming faintly in the back. That would be their key. "We go silent," she whispered. "No gunfire unless it's unavoidable. Rodriguez lights first. Jackson, you're with me on entry." "Copy that." She exhaled, the kind of slow breath that comes before a storm, and then moved. They glided through the shadows like water. Rodriguez circled wide, cutting power to the generator with two precise snips of wire. The compound sank into darkness. Confusion spread immediately, guards shouting in Arabic, flashlights flickering through the yard. Sarah moved with Jackson toward the side door, her kabar knife already in hand. She could feel her father's presence in that steel, the knife he'd carried in Vietnam, the one he'd told her never leaves a mission unfinished. Two guards passed the doorway. One went down quietly, the knife sliding between ribs. The second turned, too slow. Jackson silenced him with a chokehold that ended in seconds. They slipped inside. The air was thick with oil and dust. Rows of old machinery cast jagged shadows across the floor. Somewhere deeper inside, muffled voices echoed English mixed with Arabic. Sarah motioned forward. Her boots touched the ground like whispers. They reached a small office at the center of the compound. The door was cracked open, light spilling through. She peeked inside. A man in civilian clothes, tactical beard, tan shirt, sidearm at his hip, sat before a laptop. His posture screamed control. The way he glanced at his watch every few seconds told her he wasn't local muscle. American. Sarah exchanged a look with Jackson, a silent countdown. 3, 2, 1. They entered. Hands where I can see them, Sarah commanded, her weapon leveled. The man froze, then slowly raised his hands. You shouldn't be here, he said. His tone wasn't fear, it was irritation. Sarah stepped closer. Who are you working for? Same flag you are, he replied coolly. Question is, who are you working for, Lieutenant Reeves? Her name, spoken like a trigger. She stepped forward, grabbed the laptop and spun it around. Lines of code filled the screen, encrypted data transfers. She recognized the pattern instantly. Navy intelligence routing protocols. Access origin, East Coast Command, she muttered. Admiral Westfield. The man smirked. You really should have stayed dead after Kingfisher. The words hit harder than any bullet. For a moment, time stopped. Kingfisher, the classified mission buried in her file, the one they'd tried to erase. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. Who are you? The man smiled faintly. I'm the one who cleans up the Admiral's messes. Jackson moved first, a blur of motion. The man reached for his gun, but Sarah was faster. One shot, then silence. The sound echoed through the empty plant like a confession. She knelt beside the body, searching his pockets. A flash drive. Encrypted, naval seals on the casing. Rodriguez entered moments later, breathing hard. We're clear. Locals scattered when the power went out, but we've got movement on the ridge, vehicles inbound. Sarah plugged the flash drive into the laptop. Code scrolled like rain. Then, a series of documents unfolded, each one colder than the last. Operational transfers, unauthorized arms shipments, payments to private military contractors, names she recognized, officers, analysts, even a congressional liaison. At the center of it all, Admiral Jonathan Westfield. He wasn't just selling information. He was building something, a private network, funded by blood and secrecy. Sarah's hands shook. He used us, she whispered. Kingfisher was never about the target, it was about burying the evidence. Jackson's jaw tightened. Then we expose him. She looked up at him, weary, bruised, but resolute. We can't. Not from here. We need extraction, and we need proof that won't vanish into a secure server before we even make contact. Rodriguez scanned the horizon. Then we better move. Those vehicles are closing fast. They packed what they could, the laptop, the drive, and what little ammunition remained. As they exited the building, headlights flared across the compound gates. Trucks, 3 of them, armed men spilling out like ants. Sarah ducked behind a crate. We split. Rendezvous at the safe point, the canal bridge near the old market. If we're not all there in 1 hour, you keep moving. Jackson hesitated. Ma'am. That's in order. Then she was gone, melting into the dark. Gunfire broke the night. Rodriguez provided cover, his shots disciplined, deliberate. Jackson dragged Martinez toward a side alley, bullets snapping overhead. Sarah sprinted through the maze of machinery, her breath ragged. The scar on her face burned like fire. A round grazed her shoulder. She stumbled but didn't stop. Her mind was already ahead, calculating routes, timing, angles. She vaulted a low wall and rolled into the sand beyond. For a heartbeat, everything went still. The desert stretched around her, silent, endless. Then headlights flared again. She dove behind a wrecked vehicle, clutching the laptop to her chest. The hum of an engine grew louder. Voices, footsteps. She waited, counting them. 3, 4, maybe 5. Her pulse slowed, steadying. She drew the car again. When the first man came around the corner, flashlight sweeping the sand, she moved. One strike, then another. Silent, efficient, brutal. When it was over, 5 bodies lay cooling in the desert wind. She crouched over one of them, checking for insignia. Nothing. No tags, no identifiers. Professional mercenaries paid to disappear. A sudden crack split the night. Gunfire closer now. Jackson's voice over comms, breaking through static. Phantom 1, we're pinned at the canal. Martinez is down. Sarah's breath caught. Hold position, I'm coming. She ran. The desert blurred around her, every step a scream through her battered body. When she reached the canal bridge, the air stank of cordite and blood. Jackson was kneeling beside Martinez, pressing his hands to a wound that was already too deep. The sniper lay motionless, eyes half open, lips moving in a prayer Sarah couldn't hear. "Stay with me," Jackson muttered. "Stay." Martinez exhaled, slow and final. Sarah froze. The sound, that soft release of breath, was the cruelest silence she'd ever heard. For a moment, all she could do was kneel beside him, staring at the man who'd followed her through fire and ruin. His hand still clutched his rifle, the other stained with his own blood. She closed his eyes gently. "You're home now, Marine." Rodriguez limped up beside them, bleeding from a graze on his arm. "Convoy's pulling back. They think we're dead." Sarah nodded, her throat tightening. "Then let's make sure they're not wrong." They carried Martinez's body into the shadows, burying him beneath loose sand near the canal. No ceremony, no flag, just 3 quiet breaths and the sound of desert wind. Afterward, Sarah sat apart, staring at the horizon. Jackson approached. "You can't blame yourself, ma'am." She didn't answer. Her mind replayed the sound of Martinez's last breath, the flash of betrayal in the compound, the name Westfield burning through every thought like a brand. Finally, she said, "He trusted me. They all did, and I led them into a setup." Jackson shook his head. "You didn't set the trap, you just stepped into it first." She looked at him then, really looked, the lines of exhaustion, the dirt caked under his eyes, the quiet loyalty that had never wavered. "Then we finish what we started," she said. "We bring this into the light." "But how? We've got no comms, no backup, no clearance." Sarah's gaze drifted toward the battered laptop. "We don't need clearance, we just need a signal." She turned the device on again, shielding the screen from moonlight. It flickered weakly, damaged but functional. Using a secure relay frequency buried in her neural link, she began uploading fragments of the data to an untraceable server she'd built years ago, one she'd sworn never to use unless everything went wrong. It was going wrong now. The upload bar crawled forward, agonizingly slow. 20%, 30, 40. Every second felt like an hour. Rodriguez kept watch, scanning the horizon for headlights. Jackson reloaded his last clip, eyes darting between the dunes. 50%, 60. A low rumble shook the ground. Engines again, they were coming back. Sarah's pulse spiked, almost there, 75. The bar froze, connection lost. "No, no, come on," she muttered, striking the side of the laptop. Static filled the screen. Then a faint beep, reconnecting. 92%. She looked up at the others. "We need to move now." They ran. Dust kicked up behind them as the first bursts of gunfire tore through the sand. Bullets cracked the air. Sarah shielded the laptop with her body, sprinting toward the rocky ridge ahead. One round struck close enough to sting her calf with shards of stone. Another grazed her arm. Still, she didn't slow. At the top of the ridge, she threw herself down, panting. The screen blinked again, upload complete. A single line flashed across it, data secured, ghost link active. She exhaled shakily. We got it. Jackson crouched beside her, watching the convoy lights fade below. What now? Sarah stared into the distance, toward the faint glow of Sanaa's skyline. Now we vanish, and when we come back, we don't come quietly. She closed the laptop, the screen reflecting the scar that now marked her face like a permanent question. For the first time, she didn't feel like a soldier or a fugitive. She felt like something else entirely, a reckoning. The desert wind picked up, carrying the sand, the echoes, the names of the dead. And in that wind, Lieutenant Sarah Reeves swore a silent vow. They'd taken her file. They buried her name. But before this was over, she'd make them remember both. What does revenge feel like before it begins? Cold or quiet? The sun had risen brutal and merciless over the Yemeni horizon, bleaching the world into a glare of white. Lieutenant Sarah Reeves lay in the shallow shadow of a ridge, the wind stinging her raw cheek. The wound had sealed but not healed. The scar tugged every time she spoke. Maybe that was fitting. Some things weren't supposed to close cleanly. Below her, the remnants of Phantom Team rested in the sand, Jackson half asleep against his pack, Rodriguez cleaning the sand out of his rifle. The laptop sat between them, its battery almost dead, its secrets alive. Sarah watched the horizon for too long, the silence gnawing. She'd always thought betrayal came with noise, with shouting, accusations, explosions. But the real sound of betrayal was this, the dry hiss of the wind across a grave no one marked. "Ma'am," Jackson said quietly, sensing the thought, "we should move before the patrols sweep back." She nodded. "We head west. There's a CIA listening post near the coast, unlisted, off-grid. If it's still active, we can piggyback a signal out." Rodriguez adjusted his sling. "You think Langley's gonna answer us after what happened?" "I don't need them to answer," Sarah said. "I just need them to hear." They packed fast. Within minutes, the three were silhouettes crossing the wasteland, the desert swallowing their footprints as soon as they made them. Hours blurred into heat. The city fell away behind them, the dunes rolling endless and indifferent. Sarah's mind wandered to the men who hadn't made it, Martinez, her steady shot, the two rookies from Alpha Division lost in the first breach. Every step seemed to echo their absence. By late afternoon, they reached the ruins of an old caravan station, stone walls half buried in sand, a single palm tree clinging to life beside a dried well. They took shelter there, rationing the last of their water. Jackson broke the silence. "You think this thing you uploaded, it's enough to bring Westfield down?" Sarah stared at the horizon. "It's enough to start a fire. Whether it burns him or us depends on who catches it first." He studied her a moment. "You ever wonder why you were the one who survived Kingfisher?" She met his gaze unflinching. "Every day." There was no bitterness in her tone, just weariness, a quiet acceptance that some ghosts never left. They set out again at dusk, using the cover of twilight. The route led them through abandoned oil fields, pipes like skeletons, drills frozen mid-motion. The landscape looked like something humanity had used up and then forgotten. As night fell, a faint radio signal flickered through Sarah's comms, static, then a voice she didn't expect. "Phantom 1, this is Overlord. If you can hear me, respond." She froze. "Overlord, this is Phantom 1, reading you faint." "God, you're alive." The relief in Colonel Tangisdal's voice cracked through the static. "We lost your beacon 3 days ago. Command listed Phantom Team KIA." "Not yet," Sarah said. "We've got proof of internal compromise. Westfield's behind it. I'm transmitting evidence." "Negative," Tangisdal interrupted. "Do not transmit on this frequency. It's monitored. They'll trace you." Sarah hesitated. "Then how do we get it out?" A pause, then, "There's a NATO relief convoy leaving Aden in 24 hours. They don't know it, but one of the drivers is agency. Reach them, pass the data physically. After that, disappear." The line crackled, then died. Jackson exhaled. Disappearing sounds easier than getting there. Sarah checked her compass. We'll make it. They walked through the night. The desert air turned cold, sharp. Somewhere around 300, Rodriguez stumbled, catching himself on one knee. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded weakly. "Just the leg." She knew better. Blood loss, dehydration. He was running on grit alone. When dawn crept up again, the coastal plain stretched before them, flat, colorless, endless. In the distance, a faint smudge of smoke marked the industrial edge of Aden. But between them and the city lay an abandoned checkpoint, and 3 armed pickups parked across the road. Sarah raised her binoculars. Black uniforms, no insignia, mercs. "Westfield's dogs," Jackson muttered. "Looks like they're waiting for us." Sarah lowered the binoculars. "Then we go around, through the salt flats." The detour added 5 miles and no cover. By noon, the heat was murderous. Rodriguez's limp worsened. Jackson carried part of his gear without a word. Then the first bullet came. A dry pop in the distance, the sound of sand kicking beside Sarah's boot. "Sniper, move." They scattered, sprinting toward a ridge of rock. More shots. Dust exploded around them. Jackson fired back blindly, buying seconds. When they reached cover, Rodriguez collapsed, gasping. Sarah grabbed his shoulder. Blood soaked through his pant leg again. "It's fine," he lied. "It's not." She tore open the field kit, almost empty. 1 coagulant left. She pressed it to the wound, her hands slick with sweat and blood. "Just keep your eyes open," she said. Rodriguez managed a grin. "You always say that." He didn't realize she was shaking. Minutes crawled, the shooting stopped. Dust swirled in the silence. Jackson peeked over the ridge. "They're circling wide, trying to flush us downhill." Sarah's mind raced. The convoy, 24 hours. If they missed it, everything died here. She glanced at Rodriguez, barely conscious now. Jackson caught her look. "You can't carry him and make the deadline." "I'm not leaving him." "Ma'am, he'd tell you to finish it." Sarah stared at the horizon, jaw tight. Leadership wasn't a rank, it was the weight of impossible choices. Finally, she took a deep breath. "We make a decoy." They rigged one of their last flash grenades inside Rodriguez's pack, leaving a trail of footprints toward the far ridge. When the mercs approached, the detonation sent dust and shrapnel flying, buying them precious minutes. Under that cover, Sarah and Jackson half dragged, half carried Rodriguez toward the coast. By nightfall, they reached the outskirts of Aden, burned-out warehouses, and the faint glow of distant port lights. They collapsed inside an empty shipping container, breaths ragged. Rodriguez laughed weakly. "Still alive, told you we'd make it." Sarah smiled faintly. "Almost." Jackson checked his watch. "Convoy rolls at dawn. We rest 2 hours, then move." The hours blurred. Sarah couldn't sleep. She stared at the laptop resting on her knees, its cracked screen reflecting her scar. She thought about Westfield, the man who'd once told her she had the makings of command. The man who'd used her, framed her team, and buried their names. She whispered to herself, "You picked the wrong ghost to wake, sir." At first light they moved again, blending with the chaos of the port. Cargo trucks rumbled through the docks. Aid workers shouted in multiple languages. The convoy was forming, 12 vehicles under a NATO banner. Sarah spotted the one she needed, a white tanker truck with a faint American decal. The driver, a bearded man in civilian clothes, leaned against the hood, smoking. She approached cautiously. "Nice morning for a long drive." The man flicked his cigarette, eyes narrowing. "Depends who's asking." "Lieutenant Reeves, U.S. Navy. I've got something that needs to reach Langley." He studied her for a beat, then nodded once. "Get in the back, we leave in 10. Sarah turned to Jackson and Rodriguez. "We're going home." They climbed aboard, hidden among crates marked medical supplies. The engine started, and for the first time in days, the rumble of movement felt like hope. Halfway out of the port, the sound changed. The low hum of a drone overhead, then the sharp whistle of something cutting through air. "Incoming," Jackson shouted. The explosion hit like thunder. The convoy scattered, trucks flipping, debris raining. Sarah's head slammed against the crate. The world spun into chaos. When she came to, everything was burning. The truck had overturned. Jackson was dragging her out, shouting, but his voice was drowned in the roar. Rodriguez was pinned under wreckage, motionless. Sarah tried to crawl to him, but Jackson held her back. "He's gone, we have to move." "No." She shoved free, reaching for the laptop still clutched in Rodriguez's hands. The casing was cracked, screen shattered, but the drive was intact. She pulled it free just as another explosion tore through the wreck. Flames swallowed the truck. Jackson grabbed her arm. "Come on." They staggered toward the harbor wall as the drone circled overhead, its camera eye blinking like judgment. Sarah ducked behind a pile of debris, gasping for air. They knew the convoy route. They knew everything. Jackson's eyes darkened, which means they're still watching your file. She looked down at the drive, streaked with ash and blood. "Then I'll give them something worth watching." They ran until the city swallowed them. Narrow streets, markets, noise. The drone's hum faded behind the chaos. By dusk, they'd found refuge in an old fishing warehouse near the docks. The place reeked of salt and oil, but it was quiet. Sarah sat on the floor, trembling. The adrenaline was gone now, replaced by exhaustion that reached the bone. Jackson sat across from her, silent. Finally she spoke. "Two of us left." He nodded. "Doesn't mean we stop." "No," she said. "It means we start over." She turned the flash drive in her hand. "Somewhere out there, Westfield's watching every move we make, waiting for us to die so the story ends his way." Jackson leaned forward. "So we write a different ending." Her eyes lifted to meet his. In the flicker of a dying lamp, the scar along her cheek caught the light, no longer an injury but a promise. "We're ghosts, Jack, let's haunt them." Outside, waves crashed against the pier, the sound steady and eternal. The world thought Phantom Team was gone. Command had erased their names, sealed their files, rewritten their deaths. But in a warehouse on the edge of a foreign city, two soldiers sat plotting the truth back into existence. And somewhere across the ocean, an admiral who believed himself untouchable poured another drink, unaware that the very file he'd tried to bury had already begun to surface. Sarah Reeves would see to that. Because ghosts don't rest. They rise. What does it mean to come home when home no longer exists? The night smelled of oil, smoke, and salt. In the gutted remains of the Aden harbor, Lieutenant Sarah Reeves sat against a concrete pillar, her arms trembling from exhaustion. The skin around her scar pulsed with heat where the burn had reopened, but she didn't touch it. Pain was a luxury. She had none left to spare. Beside her, Chief Jackson wrapped gauze around his shoulder, his movements slow but sure. The two of them were all that was left of Phantom Team, and even that title felt like a memory from another life. The laptop was gone. The flash drive, cracked and bloodstained, lay on the floor between them like a relic. They had survived Yemen, barely, but survival wasn't the same as safety. "Westfield won't stop," Jackson said quietly, his voice gravelly from smoke. "He'll send more. They'll come for the drive for us to clean the mess." Sarah stared at the small object that had cost so many lives. "Then, we stay ahead of the cleanup." "You have a plan." "I always have a plan," she said softly. Then, almost to herself, "I just don't know if I still have the strength to pull it off." The admission hung in the air, honest, heavy, human. Jackson looked at her, something raw flickering in his expression. "You're the reason any of us made it this far. You don't get to doubt that now." She gave a faint, broken smile. "You sound like my dad." He smiled back, tired. Then I'll take that as a compliment. Outside, the city glowed faintly in the distance. Somewhere out there, Westfield's mercenaries were still searching. Sarah knew the pattern: sweep, choke, corner. They had maybe 12 hours before the net closed again. She checked her watch. We move before dawn. There's an old smuggler's route through the mountains. From there, we can reach the coast road and hitch onto a freighter bound for Djibouti. Jackson arched a brow. You think anyone's just gonna let two ghosts board their ship? They don't have to let us. They just have to not notice us. He laughed under his breath. You've been hanging around CIA assets too long. She didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. They left the warehouse an hour before sunrise. The air was cold, the kind of cold that seeped through fabric and bone. Sarah moved like a shadow, every step careful, deliberate. They weaved through fishing nets, rusted containers, the husks of burned trucks. At the edge of the harbor, a figure appeared from the mist, an older man, thin, wrapped in a faded keffiyeh. His eyes were sharp, watchful. Sarah's hand went to her holster. "Relax," Jackson murmured. "If he meant harm, we'd already be dead." The man spoke in rough English. "You're not supposed to be here." "Neither are you," Sarah replied. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward the horizon. "There's a freighter leaving for Berbera in 1 hour. The captain doesn't ask questions, but he doesn't do favors." Sarah glanced at the flash drive in her hand. "He'll get paid, just not in money." The man's gaze flicked to the drive. "Information." "Insurance," she said simply. He hesitated, then gestured for them to follow. The walk to the docks felt longer than it should have. Every creak of metal, every splash of water set Sarah's nerves on edge. The air reeked of diesel and fish. She moved close to the shadows, her eyes scanning for movement, her ears tuned to every sound. At the far end of the pier, an old freighter sat tethered, its paint flacking, its deck lights dim. The name Al-Hidia glowed faintly in Arabic script. The smuggler spoke quietly to one of the deckhands. Money changed hands, a curt nod. Then he turned back to Sarah. "You have 10 minutes. Once we're at sea, you're just more cargo." "That's fine," she said. "We're used to being invisible." They climbed aboard. The freighter groaned as if protesting the weight of more ghosts. For the next 24 hours, the ship cut across the Gulf of Aden under a gray, endless sky. Sarah stayed below deck, hidden among crates of dried goods. The rhythmic thrum of the engine lulled her into half-consciousness. For the first time since the mission began, there was no gunfire, no orders, no adrenaline. Just silence and the thoughts she'd been avoiding. She kept seeing Martinez's face, the way he'd smiled before the convoy, the way his voice had cracked when he said, "Still alive." And Rodriguez laughing through the pain, calling her ma'am, even when she told him not to. Their ghost sat beside her in the dark, unblinking. Jackson broke the silence. "You're blaming yourself again." She didn't look up. "You think I should?" "I think they'd tell you not to. You didn't kill them, Sarah. Westfield did." Her fingers tightened around the flash drive. "Then he answers for it." Jackson leaned back against a crate. "You ever think about what happens when he does, when the truth comes out?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean you expose him, you expose yourself. The whole Kingfisher file. Your name, your record. Everything they buried to keep the machine running." She met his gaze, her voice quiet but steady. "Then let it burn. The truth's worth it." He smiled faintly. "You sound like a soldier who stopped wanting to be one." She hesitated. "Maybe I have." The hum of the engines filled the space between them. They reached Berbera at dawn 2 days later. The port was chaos, a maze of cargo ships, military patrols, and local traders shouting prices. Sarah and Jackson slipped ashore unnoticed, blending with the flow of dockworkers. For the first time in weeks, they were technically out of the war zone, but safety was still an illusion. Westfield's reach didn't stop at borders. They found temporary refuge in a rundown hostel near the market. The walls were thin, the electricity unreliable, but it was shelter. Sarah cleaned her wound with alcohol from a med kit, hissing as it burned. Jackson tossed a local newspaper onto the bed. Front page: unidentified Americans killed in drone strike near Aden. Guess we're officially dead. She looked at the headline for a long moment. Then, let's make sure they regret underestimating ghosts. She opened the flash drive and began the next step. The files were dense: raw data, financial transfers, encrypted communications. Buried among them was a list of names, code-named agents, accounts, offshore companies, all connected to Westfield's private operation. But one detail froze her blood. Operation Sentinel. A continuation of Kingfisher, different region, same structure, scheduled for deployment within weeks. And it involved personnel she recognized, young operators, still in training. They were walking into the same trap she had barely escaped. "They're going to sacrifice another team," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Jackson leaned over her shoulder. "Then we move fast." Sarah opened a secure link through a backdoor protocol she'd memorized years ago, one that bypassed normal Navy encryption. It was dangerous, traceable, but there was no other way. She typed, "Urgent, Operation Sentinel compromised, Westfield active, intercept before deployment." Then she sent it. The message vanished into cyberspace. Now all they could do was wait. Hours passed. Then the laptop pinged once: an incoming message. Message received. Source unverified. Verify identity. Sarah's fingers hovered. She hesitated, then typed, "Lieutenant Sarah Reeves, Phantom 1, Kingfisher survivor." A pause, then another line appeared. "God help us, we thought you were dead." Sarah stared at the words, emotion flickering across her face, not relief exactly, but something deeper. Vindication. "Who is this?" she typed. "Langley Field Op, codename Falcon. We've been tracking Westfield shell companies for months. Your data fills the gap." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Then you can stop Sentinel." "We can expose it, but we need confirmation from inside U.S. command. Someone to verify the data chain. Can you provide?" Her throat tightened. "No, not anymore. They erased me." The cursor blinked. Then find someone who still believes in ghosts." The connection cut. She closed the laptop slowly. Jackson looked at her. "What now?" "We find that someone," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "You've got someone in mind, don't you?" Sarah's eyes darkened. "Colonel Tangisdal. She was the only one who ever doubted the official story after Kingfisher. If anyone still believes in me, it's her." "She's back at Norfolk Command," Jackson said. "That's halfway across the world." Sarah glanced at the map on the wall. "Then that's where we're going." He let out a low whistle. "How do you plan to cross continents when we're both on a kill list?" She gave a faint smile. "Same way we've survived everything else, quietly." That night, under the flickering light of the hostel's single bulb, Sarah stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror. The scar on her cheek caught the light like a line of fire. For a long time, she said nothing. Then softly, as if to herself, "They wanted my file, they got it. Now they'll wish they hadn't." She slipped the flash drive into a small waterproof capsule and tied it under her shirt. Outside, the night was alive with noise, horns, shouts, ocean wind. But inside that small room, something shifted. For weeks, Sarah Reeves had been surviving. Now she was hunting. What's the price of truth when the truth itself is forbidden? The first time Lieutenant Sarah Reeves saw the African sunrise from the cargo deck of a fishing vessel, she almost mistook it for peace. It was the color of exhaustion, gold bleeding into red. 2 weeks had passed since the explosion at Aden. The world believed Phantom Team was gone, erased by a drone strike that never officially happened. And yet here she was, alive, invisible, carrying a truth that could burn the entire command structure of the Navy. Across from her, Chief Jackson leaned against a crate of fishing nets, a tattered cap shadowing his face. The salt wind tugged at his sleeves. He looked like any other tired traveler, but his eyes never rested. "You ever think about what happens after?" he asked suddenly. "After what?" "After you hand over that drive. After the whole thing blows open." Sarah stared out at the endless water. "No one ever asks what happens after justice," she said softly, "because no one ever lives long enough to see it." The ship rocked gently. For a while neither of them spoke. By nightfall the vessel docked at Port Sudan. From there, their journey would become a blur of forged documents, cash payments, and coded routes. Their goal: reach Europe, then Norfolk Command and Colonel Merrill Tangistal. Tangistal was their only thread of trust left, the only senior officer who'd ever questioned Admiral Westfield's version of Kingfisher. If anyone could validate their data, it was her. But every hour they stayed alive was a small miracle. They moved mostly at night, through safe houses run by old contacts, sympathetic operators, and a few ghosts from Sarah's past. Each border was a memory of a different failure. Each checkpoint, a reminder that the line between soldier and fugitive was thinner than anyone ever told her. In Addis Ababa, they hid in a cargo warehouse for 2 days, waiting for forged European visas. Sarah sat on a crate, disassembling and cleaning her sidearm for the 100th time. Jackson watched her quietly. "You don't trust anyone anymore, do you?" "I can't afford to," she said. He studied her face, the scar catching the light, the faint tremor in her hand when she thought no one was looking. "You're tired." "I'm alive," she countered. He smiled faintly, barely. She looked away. He wasn't wrong. The lack of sleep, the stress, the constant vigilance, they were all eating at her. But something inside her refused to break. Maybe it was duty, maybe guilt, or maybe it was that she couldn't bear to let Westfield win. That night, as the city lights blinked like dying stars, Sarah replayed the data files in her head. Operation Sentinel, a mirrored version of Kingfisher, another hostage extraction masking a transfer of illegal arms through the Horn of Africa. Dozens of new operators, young, loyal, unknowing, set up to die for profit. She couldn't let that happen again, not to them, not to anyone. When their papers arrived, they moved fast into northern Ethiopia, then by convoy into Egypt. Each checkpoint was a test of nerves. Sarah's scar became a tool. She hid it beneath a scarf when questioned, claiming she'd been injured in a factory accident. They reached Alexandria under cover of darkness. From there, a cargo ship would take them to southern Europe, Athens, if all went well. But nothing in Sarah's life ever went well without a cost. Halfway through the Mediterranean crossing, Jackson found a tracker buried inside one of their duffel bags. "Military grade." "They're on us again," he said. Sarah's heart sank. "How?" He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Someone in the chain we used sold us out." She gritted her teeth. "Then we go dark again. Blackfish Protocol version 2. Jackson gave her a dry look. "We're running out of names for going dark." "Then we stop calling it that," she said. "We just disappear." They dumped their bags, switched cabins, and broke the tracker in half before tossing it into the sea. Sarah watched it sink beneath the waves, thinking how easy it was to vanish, and how hard it was to stay human while doing it. On the 5th day they reached Athens. The city was alive, loud, uncaring. For 2 people pretending to be dead, it was the perfect place to breathe. Sarah and Jackson took refuge in a safe flat near the old port, an apartment owned by an ex-operative who owed Tangistal a favor. For the first time in weeks there was a shower, real food, silence without fear. Sarah stood under the water for nearly 20 minutes, watching the blood and sand spiral down the drain. When she stepped out, she caught her reflection in the fogged mirror, thinner, older, eyes too sharp. The woman who stared back wasn't the same soldier who joined the Navy a decade ago. That woman had believed in hierarchy, honor, clean orders. This one believed in none of those things, only in truth. That night, Sarah opened the encrypted flash drive again, studying its contents under the dim kitchen light. Each folder was another piece of Westfield's empire: data laundering through defense contracts, the sale of classified intelligence to private militaries, the silencing of anyone who found out. And at the center of it all, a name she hadn't expected: Colonel Merrill Tangisdal. Sarah froze. Her pulse stopped for a moment. She clicked the file open. Tangisdal's name wasn't listed as a suspect, but as observer, attached to several key transmissions. She'd been monitoring Westfield's operations for over a year, quietly compiling data of her own. "Son of a," Jackson muttered, reading over her shoulder. "She's been watching him the whole time." Sarah exhaled slowly. "Which means she's either our ally, or she's in deeper than we thought," Jackson finished. The revelation changed everything. If Tangisdal had been part of the surveillance, it meant she'd known about Kingfisher, maybe even suspected Westfield's betrayal before it happened. Maybe she'd even tried to stop it. Or maybe she just waited for someone like Sarah to surface, to use as a witness when the timing was right. Sarah wanted to believe the first version. She needed to. "We still go to her," she said finally. "We need someone inside command, and she's the only one left who hasn't tried to kill us." Jackson nodded. "Then we head for Norfolk." They left Greece 2 nights later using forged NATO transport credentials. The trip took them through Italy, France, then across the Atlantic aboard a cargo plane bound for Virginia. Each stop felt like a heartbeat, one closer to home, one closer to the truth. By the time the coastline of the United States came into view, Sarah felt nothing. No nostalgia, no relief, just purpose. Landing was easy. Getting through customs was. They were ghosts walking through the system that had buried them. Still, Tangisdal's connections must have greased something, because the fake IDs held. They rented an unmarked car and drove straight to Norfolk Command, blending with the traffic of sailors and contractors. The closer they got, the more Sarah's heart began to twist. This was the place where it had all begun: the briefings, the camaraderie, the illusion of belonging. Now it felt like walking back into a church where she'd lost her faith. They parked 2 blocks from the perimeter fence. "You sure she's not gonna turn us in?" Jackson asked quietly. "No," Sarah said honestly. "But if she does, at least we'll know where we stand." She walked through the gate alone, using her old clearance code, one she knew was probably still flagged as deceased. The scanner hesitated, beeped red once, then green. Jackson let out a low whistle. Guess the ghosts still have keys. Inside, the air felt sterile: fluorescent lights, cold floors, the hum of servers. Every sound echoed. A guard led them through to a secure briefing room. No words exchanged, no questions asked. When the door opened, Colonel Merrill Tangisdal stood waiting. She looked older, more lined, more tired, but her eyes were the same. Sharp, unflinching, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and still refused to look away. "Lieutenant Reeves," she said quietly, "you were supposed to be dead." Sarah stood straighter. "I got tired of being what people expected." Tangisdal studied her face, the scar, the exhaustion, the defiance. Then she turned to Jackson. "You too, Chief. You always had a knack for surviving impossible odds." Jackson gave a tight nod. "Guess we learned from the best." Tangisdal motioned for them to sit. "Start talking." Sarah placed the flash drive on the table. Everything on there. Westfield's entire operation: Kingfisher, Sentinel, the cover-ups, the money trail. Tangisdal didn't reach for it immediately. "You've seen this." "I lived it," Sarah said. For the first time, something flickered behind Tangisdal's eyes: grief, maybe. Or guilt. "I've been tracking him too," she said finally. "But I didn't have proof, just suspicions. You've brought me more than that. you've brought me a weapon." Sarah's voice hardened. "I didn't come here to start another war, Colonel. I came here to end one." Tangisdal nodded slowly. "Then let's finish it." She took the flash drive and inserted it into a secure console. The room's lights dimmed as encrypted data poured across the screen. Jackson exhaled. "You're really gonna do it, huh? Blow the lid off." Tangisdal's jaw tightened. "I've spent 20 years watching the system eat its own. It's time it choked." Sarah watched her in silence. Part of her wanted to believe this woman was still clean, that someone inside the machine could still have integrity. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "Trust no one." Tangisdal's eyes lifted from the screen. "What happened in Yemen, Sarah? They'll write it as treason, you understand. Once this data goes public, the people who ordered your death will come for you again." Sarah met her gaze. "Then they'll find I'm harder to kill the second time." The colonel almost smiled. "Almost, I believe you." The screen beeped once, data upload complete. Tangisdal removed the drive and sealed it in an encrypted case. "In 24 hours, she said. "This goes before a joint intelligence tribunal. After that, the world's going to know exactly what Admiral Westfield has been doing." Sarah nodded, but something in her chest didn't settle. A hollow quiet filled the room. She turned to Jackson. "It's almost over." He studied her expression. "Or it's just beginning." Outside, the sky over Norfolk darkened with rain. Thunder rolled across the bay. Inside the command building, 3 soldiers, 2 ghosts and 1 believer, stood on the edge of a reckoning. But in that silence, a single thought cut through Sarah's mind. When you hand the truth to the system that betrayed you, how long before it betrays you again? How do you win a war when the battlefield is made of secrets? The rain fell in slow, heavy sheets across Norfolk Command, streaking the glass of the tribunal building like veins of gray. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Rows of officers filled the observation gallery, faces expressionless, uniforms immaculate. Cameras lined the walls, recording what would later be classified under a dozen code names. At the center sat Lieutenant Sarah Reeves, her posture straight, her uniform plain. The scar along her cheek caught the light whenever she turned her head, a reminder carved by betrayal itself. Beside her sat Chief Jackson, silent as stone. Across the table, Colonel Merrill Tangisdal oversaw the tribunal panel, 3 flag officers, 1 intelligence director, and an official from the Department of Defense. And at the far end of the room, flanked by 2 aides in pristine dress whites, stood Admiral Jonathan Westfield. Sarah hadn't seen him in nearly 3 years, not since the Kingfisher briefing. He looked older now, but not weaker. His face still carried that confident composure, the kind of arrogance polished by decades of rank. He met her eyes and smiled. "Lieutenant Reeves, I must say resurrection suits you." She didn't respond. Tangisdal's voice cut through the silence. "Admiral, you've been accused of orchestrating unauthorized military operations, illegal weapons transfers, and deliberate manipulation of intelligence resulting in the deaths of U.S. personnel. These charges stem from evidence provided by Lieutenant Reeves and Chief Jackson, survivors of the Yemen incident." Westfield folded his hands. "Colonel, I've reviewed the so-called evidence. It's a fabrication. The idea that a flag officer of my standing would compromise U.S. security for personal gain is absurd." Tangisdal's gaze hardened. "Absurd doesn't mean impossible." He smiled faintly. "No, but it does mean unbelievable. You're building a conspiracy out of coincidence, Colonel, and you're using a traumatized operator as your foundation." Sarah's jaw tightened. She wanted to speak, to shout, but she didn't. The tribunal wasn't the battlefield she was trained for. Words were the weapons here, and Westfield was an expert marksman. Tangisdal turned to her. "Lieutenant Reeves, for the record, recount the events following your deployment to Yemen." Sarah inhaled slowly. Our mission was an extraction, an American aid worker held by Al-Qaeda affiliates. Intelligence indicated 4 hostiles. We found 11. The target building was a trap. We were compromised from the inside before the breach. And who provided that intelligence? Central Command Liaison, under Admiral Westfield's oversight. Westfield's smile didn't falter. Objection. I delegate oversight. My office approves operations, it doesn't plan them. Sarah continued. When our extraction failed, I received confirmation of unauthorized access to my personnel file mid-operation. The system flagged my biometric data. Only 3 individuals had clearance that deep. Admiral Westfield was one. He leaned back unbothered. You're misinterpreting a data ping, Lieutenant. Happens often in active operations. Faulty sensors. Sarah's hands clenched on the table. Faulty sensors don't assassinate 11 of my men. A murmur rippled through the room. Tangisdal held up a hand for silence. Lieutenant, please describe what happened after the mission was compromised. She spoke carefully, measured, restrained, every word deliberate. We initiated Blackfish Protocol. We went dark, no contact, no support. During our evasion, we uncovered a compound connected to Westfield's private contractors. We recovered a laptop containing evidence of illegal data transfers and a file labeled Operation Sentinel. That file contained coordinates for another mission, identical to Kingfisher. Same tactics, same trap. Tangisdal turned to the Admiral. Do you deny the existence of Operation Sentinel? Westfield didn't blink. Sentinel was an internal training simulation, a hypothetical scenario, nothing more. Sarah felt the anger twist in her chest. Tell that to the operators scheduled for deployment next week. Westfield finally looked at her. His eyes were calm, almost pitying. You were always too emotional for command, Reeves. That's why I kept you in the field. It took everything in her not to stand. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer, the air heavier. Tangisdal broke the silence. The tribunal has reviewed the digital evidence submitted by Lieutenant Reeves and authenticated it through multiple independent agencies. The data trail confirms your signature, Admiral, offshore accounts, defense contractor communications, and falsified operation logs. Do you deny signing these transfers? Westfield smiled again, a predator in full control. Of course not. Those signatures were placed under duress. Stolen clearance codes, a clever forgery. He looked directly at Sarah. She was in my unit, she had my access. Who else could have created them? The accusation landed like a blade. Gasps rippled through the observers. Tangisdal's eyes snapped to him. That's a serious claim. I don't make idle claims, Westfield said. You're all so desperate for a villain that you've forgotten how easily a soldier's trauma can cloud her judgment. Sarah finally spoke, her voice low, steady, dangerous. You can twist the truth, Admiral, but you can't erase it anymore. He tilted his head. You sound like a woman who still believes truth has power. Her eyes hardened. It does, just not the way you think. The panel called for recess. The room emptied into hushed conversation. Sarah sat in silence, her pulse hammering. Jackson leaned closer. You okay? She nodded, though her hands trembled. He's turning it back on us. Classic counterintel play, create doubt, muddy the record. Then we clean the record, Jackson said. They followed Tangisdal into the corridor. The colonel's face was pale, her jaw tight. He's good, she said softly. He's been playing this game longer than either of us. Sarah stopped. You believe me, don't you? Tangisdal met her eyes. I wouldn't be here if I didn't, but proof isn't belief, Lieutenant. Proof has to survive scrutiny. Then we find more, Sarah said. We still have the ghost link. The data upload from Yemen, it was mirrored. There's another copy. Tangisdal frowned. Where? Sarah hesitated. In a server farm buried under Naval Logistics Command, access level 7, Westfield's private vault. The colonel exhaled. If that's true, we can end this. Jackson glanced between them. That's a fortress. You're talking about walking into the belly of the beast. Tangisdal looked at Sarah. Can you get us in? She nodded slowly. Yes, but once we do, there's no going back. That night, under the cover of the storm, they made their move. Sarah led the way, black fatigues, minimal gear, old habits taking hold. Jackson covered the perimeter while Tangisdal provided the access codes. They slipped past security checkpoints, down into the sublevels of Norfolk Command, where the hum of servers replaced the sound of rain. The vault was a chamber of glass and light, endless rows of humming data towers. At the center, a console requiring both biometric and voice authorization. Tangisdal stepped forward. Westfield's voice ID is required for unlock. Sarah's mind raced. Can you synthesize it? Not without a recording. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. I've had one since Yemen. Tangisdal raised a brow. You recorded him. Always record the man who smiles too much, Sarah said. The playback was short, a simple phrase Westfield had once said during a briefing. Proceed with extreme caution, Lieutenant. The system processed the waveform. Green light blinked. Access granted. Data cascaded across the screens. Westfield's full operation logs, internal communications, and the transfer routes for Sentinel. It was all there. Jackson whistled softly. He's finished. But then Tangisdal's expression changed. She stared at one line of data, a timestamp. This can't be right. Sarah leaned closer. What is it? Tangisdal's voice dropped. This log was created 12 hours ago, while the tribunal was already in session. Sarah froze. He knew we'd come here. The overhead lights flickered. Sirens erupted. Red beacons spun across the walls. Security locked down, Jackson cursed. Tangisdal turned to Sarah. He's framing this as espionage. We tripped his trap. Footsteps thundered down the corridor. Sarah yanked the drive from the console, stuffing it into her vest. We move. They sprinted through the sublevels, alarms blaring, armed guards closing in from both ends. The sound of boots echoed like drumfire. Jackson covered their flank, returning fire with controlled bursts. Tangisdal keyed emergency overrides on every door they passed. When they burst onto the service deck, rain slammed against the open hatchway. Helicopter lights cut through the storm search beams sweeping the base. Jackson shouted over the wind, "Extraction." "Forget extraction," Sarah yelled. "We're the targets now." A flash of movement, a sniper glint from the tower. Sarah pushed Tangisdal down just as the round cracked past, shattering glass above them. Jackson returned fire, then waved them forward. "Go, I'll cover." Sarah hesitated. "That's an order, Chief." He grinned, just once tired, genuine. "You taught me that ghosts don't quit, ma'am. I'll catch up." She wanted to argue, but there was no time. She dragged Tangisdal toward the perimeter gate, rain mixing with the blood running down her temple. The alarms grew distant behind them, the night swallowing the chaos. When they finally collapsed beneath the bridge outside the base, both soaked and shaking, Sarah looked back at the compound, its lights pulsing red like a wounded heart. Tangisdal caught her breath. "Do you have it?" Sarah tapped the drive on her vest, every last lie. The colonel nodded, voice hoarse. "Then we make it count." Sarah stared out at the rain. "Jackson." Tangisdal hesitated. "He bought us the time." Sarah closed her eyes. The sound of the storm blurred into memory. In the distance, the wail of sirens faded into nothing. She whispered, half to herself, half to the ghost who'd stayed behind. "You did your duty, Chief. I'll do mine." The moral reflection formed quietly in her chest, a truth too heavy to speak aloud. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It bleeds quietly until the lies drown in it. How much truth can one person carry before it destroys them? Rain fell like shrapnel across the bay. Every drop hissed on the metal bridge where Lieutenant Sarah Reeves crouched, soaked to the bone, gripping the encrypted drive to her chest. The flash of red alarms from Norfolk Command pulsed behind her like a dying heartbeat. She wasn't running anymore. She was surviving long enough to be heard. Beside her, Colonel Merrill Tangisdall slumped against the guardrail, chest heaving, her uniform streaked with mud. The woman who had once represented the system now looked like someone trying to save it from itself. They escaped the lockdown, but not cleanly. Chief Jackson hadn't made it out. His last gunfire had echoed through the corridors until it merged with the storm outside, and then silence. Sarah stared out into the rain. "He bought us seconds," she said softly. "That's all we ever buy, isn't it? Seconds." Tangisdall wiped blood from her forehead. "Seconds can change history." Sarah nodded once, then looked down at the drive. "We need a secure uplink. If Westfield locks down communications, we lose everything." The colonel's voice was faint. "There's an old comm array under the East Pier. Outdated, but it connects directly to the Navy's civilian liaison net. He won't expect us to use it." Sarah helped her up. "Then that's where we go." They moved through the rain, sticking to the shadows. Searchlights swept the docks. Helicopters combed the shoreline. The air smelled of salt and smoke. Every few seconds the loudspeaker crackled with orders. "All personnel remain in lockdown protocol. 2 suspects armed and dangerous." Suspects. That's what they were now. Fugitives branded traitors for daring to tell the truth. When they reached the pier, the storm had grown violent. Waves slammed against the concrete pillars below, spraying cold mist. Tangisdall pointed to a rusted hatch half buried under debris. "There." Sarah pried it open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Inside, the old communications room was a relic of another era, cables hanging like vines, monitors flickering with static. But power still hummed somewhere deep within. Sarah moved fast, connecting the drive to the terminal, bypassing the outdated encryption manually. Tangisdall stood watch by the door, her pistol drawn. The screen blinked alive. "Uplink offline. Manual override required." Sarah swore under her breath. "He's already blocking external transmissions." "Can you override it?" "Not from here," she said, frustration sharpening her voice. "But if we reroute through the civilian frequency." "Do it." Her fingers flew over the keyboard. The system protested with a shrill alarm, then relented. Manual relay engaged, bandwidth limited, estimated upload time 4 minutes. 4 minutes, she said, might as well be forever. Tangisdall reloaded her pistol. "Then we hold it." The storm howled outside. Footsteps echoed faintly through the pier, search teams closing in. Sarah focused on the progress bar crawling across the screen. 30%, 40%. The signal flickered. She adjusted the frequency manually, rerouting through an unlisted Navy satellite, one of Westfield's own backups. Irony, she thought. He built the system that would undo him. At 60%, a gunshot shattered the silence. Tangisdall fired back, ducking behind a column. "They're here." Sarah kept typing, heart hammering. 75%. The door burst open. Flashlights cut through the dark. Tangisdall dropped one with a clean shot, then another. A third returned fire, the bullet ricocheting off the metal wall. Sparks showered across the room. "3 more," she shouted. Sarah's vision blurred from exhaustion. Her fingers slipped, blood from her reopened wound smearing the keys. 90%. Tangisdall fired again. One of the intruders went down. The other 2 advanced. She took a hit to the shoulder, staggering but staying upright. "Get down," Sarah yelled. Tangisdall didn't. She kept firing, each shot slower than the last. 95%. The colonel fell. Sarah turned, firing blindly until the last intruder hit the floor. Then she dropped beside Tangisdall, hands pressing against the wound. "Stay with me," she said. Tangisdal's breath hitched. "You finish this, Reeves. Don't let them rewrite it again." Sarah swallowed hard. "I won't." The colonel's grip tightened once, then went still. Sarah stared at her for a moment that felt eternal. Then she turned back to the screen. "Upload complete." The words glowed faintly in the dark. She'd done it. The data, all of Westfield's crimes, operations, payments, directives, had been transmitted across multiple networks: the Pentagon, Congress, major media outlets. There was no pulling it back now. The truth was free. Sarah unplugged the drive, her hands shaking. The storm outside had reached its crescendo, thunder roaring, rain pounding like artillery. Footsteps echoed again from the tunnel entrance, heavier this time, tactical boots. She recognized the sound. Westfield. He stepped into the doorway, trench coat drenched, pistol drawn. 2 armed officers flanked him. "Lieutenant," he said calmly, "you've made quite a mess." Sarah didn't move. "Took me years to clean up yours." He smiled faintly. "You think you've won something here? The data won't matter. By morning it'll be buried under national security concerns. You'll be a traitor, a ghost erased again." She looked at him, her eyes calm. "Maybe, but this time I'll haunt you first." He raised his pistol. "You should have stayed dead." Sarah's hand moved faster than thought. One shot, precise, deliberate. His gun clattered to the floor. He staggered, clutching his arm, eyes wide. "You don't have the authority." She cut him off. "Authority's earned, you gave yours away." The officers hesitated, uncertain. Sarah tossed her pistol aside and stepped closer. "You built your empire on the blood of people who trusted you. Kingfisher, Sentinel. You sold us Admiral." He sneered through the pain. "You can't prove intent." She nodded toward the console. "I don't have to, the world saw it." Outside, sirens wailed, not for her this time, but for him. The officers lowered their weapons. One of them looked at her, uncertain. "Ma'am, what now?" Sarah's voice was quiet. "Now we stop lying." Westfield slumped against the wall, defeated, his arrogance dissolving under the weight of exposure. When the military police arrived minutes later, Sarah didn't resist. She stood in the rain, hands raised, the encrypted drive still warm in her pocket. Reporters, drones buzzed overhead. The storm had drawn them like vultures to lightning. By dawn, the leaks had spread across every major network. Headlines rolled in waves. Admiral Westfield, under investigation for treason. Classified OPS linked 2 illegal arms. Kingfisher and Sentinel cover-ups exposed. Sarah sat alone in an interrogation cell as the world she once served began tearing itself open. A young intelligence officer entered, nervous, holding a tablet. "Lieutenant Reeves, they want to know if you'd like to make a statement." She looked up at him, her face hollowed by fatigue but her eyes steady. "Tell them the truth doesn't need a statement. It just needs witnesses." He hesitated. "And the others, your team." She closed her eyes briefly. "Jackson, Rodriguez, Martinez." Their names whispered through her like prayer. "They were the truth," she said softly, before anyone wanted to hear it. When he left, the room fell silent again. Hours passed. Then footsteps echoed in the hall, not boots but heels. The door opened, and a woman entered in civilian clothes, her expression unreadable. "Ma'am," Sarah said, weary, "you're not Jag. Who are you?" The woman smiled faintly. "Langley, codename Falcon. We spoke once from Berbera." Sarah blinked. "You got the message." Loud and clear, and for what it's worth, Falcon's voice softened. "You did it. Westfield's empire is collapsing. Congress convened an emergency inquiry this morning. The president wants a full purge of his network." Sarah exhaled slowly. For the first time in months, the tension in her chest loosened. Falcon sat across from her. "You'll face inquiry too. They'll question everything, your methods, your motives, but you won't go down with him, not after this. Sarah gave a tired smile. I'm not afraid of going down, I just wanted it to mean something. Falcon studied her for a moment, then said quietly, You know, there's a position opening in Counterintel Command. Civilian liaison, you'd fit. Sarah raised an eyebrow, protecting others from what happened to me. Exactly. She thought for a moment, then nodded faintly. Then yeah, maybe I'll take it. Falcon stood, gathering her things. You'll get your discharge papers in a week, but Lieutenant. Sarah looked up. The agent smiled gently. The Navy might erase your record, but people like me. We don't forget ghosts. When Falcon left, Sarah sat alone again, listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights. The rain outside had stopped. The world was quiet. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small waterproof capsule, the one she'd tied under her shirt weeks ago. Inside was the second copy of the drive. Insurance. She set it on the table, turning it slowly between her fingers. Then she smiled, small, tired, unbreakable. A voiceover would have carried softly over the closing image. Sometimes the world doesn't need another hero. It needs someone willing to stay when the fight's over. Someone who carries the truth, even when it costs everything. She stood, leaving the capsule on the table. Outside the interrogation room, dawn light spilled across the corridor, pale gold, soft, clean. The kind of light that belongs to beginnings, not endings. As she walked toward it, the final thought rose in her mind like a quiet oath. The words that had carried her through blood, loss, and betrayal. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.